make a start. Welcome everybody to our Replicating Retrofit event tonight. A few housekeeping points first. In respect of COVID rules, please keep your mask on when you're moving around the building. Obviously, if you are sitting down, you don't need to wear it, or if you're having a drink. Drinks, if you haven't got a drink, get a drink. We've got all sorts of things there. Please don't take them outside. It's the licensing thing. And given how youthful you all look, can you just confirm that you're all over 18? So yeah, toilets are just through here, first on the right, and there's a couple further around there if you want that. To our virtual audience, hello. Just to say, please keep your microphones muted, but do add questions into the chat, and our chat host will grab them out, and hopefully we'll have time to get to some of those questions at the end of the panel. Yeah, so I think we'll just have a couple of words. All of this has been possible through the Ecology Building Society, who've been really generous sponsors. So Ian's going to come and just give us a little bit of a background about who they are and why we're really happy to have them here.
Thank you. Cheers. Right, as Sarah said, I'm Ian Regalsford, External Affairs Manager at Ecology Building Society, and we're really pleased to be supporting the ACAN programme here during COP26 in Glasgow. And I've been here since last night, and just sort of really noticed, and it's been great to sort of meet so many of the ACAN members and sort of see the sort of the way that the way ACAN works resonates with the way that Ecology works. I'm really delighted that we're supporting the ACAN programme. So, yep. Yeah, no. No.
Yeah, just that one. This little one here.
That one. Okay. Yes, yeah. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. No, that's not worked.
Oh. If we do that, there we go.
Okay, that's fine. Brilliant. Okay. So just a few words about Ecology. We're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. We were set up in 1981 with a mission to effectively build a greener society. We've grown quite steadily since that time. Now got a membership of over 10,000, probably now closer to 11,000 members, with assets of more than 220 million at the end of last year. And we're hoping that's going to increase again significantly this year, because we've seen a huge amount of interest in our sustainable lending in the last 10, 11 months. Most of our members are generally sustainability oriented, and our members are essentially our savings customers, people who choose to save with Ecology, and our borrowers, people who choose to take out a mortgage with Ecology and either build their own home or get involved in the sort of sustainable community enterprise, or do a energy efficient retrofit. We're based in West Yorkshire, in lovely offices with permaculture gardens, which makes a big difference to the culture of the organisation. But we do operate across the UK, and in fact Scotland itself is our largest area for lending. So one of the key things about Ecology is that all of our lending, you might have heard quite a lot about green mortgages in the last sort of couple of years, but one of the differences with Ecology is that all of our lending is effectively a green mortgage. And any borrower applying for finance through us needs to demonstrate that the whole purpose of what they're doing is aligned with our ecological policies, which have really been in place. They've been updated a few times, but been in place since the very beginning in 1981. We also have got a few other smaller investments in renewable energy and cooperative initiatives. I think that's the last point, is that sustainability, ecological principles is absolutely at the core of our culture and personality. Oh. Yep, I've got it now. That's fine. Okay. So just a quick sense of who we are. Everybody has to have a vision and a mission and some values. So we are a fair society in a sustainable world. That's our vision, what we'd like to see. Our shorthand for the mission is building a greener society, but really we're here to enable and support sustainable buildings and communities with the values there, which, you know, fairness, openness, responsibility, cooperation and activism, very much aligned to the kind of cooperative movement. Us being a mutual is really important to us. And I think that piece there, that mission doesn't talk about lending or money. It talks about enabling sustainable building and communities. So actually going beyond just merely providing finance is a core part of what we're about. So that mission really separates us between other building societies and banks. There's no other building society or bank in the UK that does what we do in the way that we do it. So really, we're here to very much make sure that the activities that we do, the projects that we support, help achieve a wider positive impact on people and planet. So people put their money with Ecology, they save with Ecology, because they can be confident that we're going to be using their money for positive environmental or social purposes. And our borrowing members, they borrow from us because they need somebody to help finance their sustainable construction or renovation project. I think it's fair to say that the borrowers we have are a broad church, and some may be really motivated by the environmental principles, and others it may be that we're the lender that will provide the finance that they need, because there might be some unusual aspect to it. But it doesn't really matter what their motivation is. They still have to align to our ecological principles. Okay, so just a quick canter through the types of lending we do. We support individual self-build projects or group self-build projects, conversions, renovations and retrofits. We also have a number of kind of affordable housing projects supporting, particularly in the community housing space. And some buy-to-let, but there are some restrictions on buy-to-lets. So, but for example, we wouldn't do holiday lets, which we don't lend on because of the impact on some local communities. And interestingly, we also provide finance for woodlands and moorings as well. It's all about sustainable living. So behind the kind of ecological principles, which sort of needs to work for the borrower in terms of how does the finance actually work. So we have a series of sea change discounts, and essentially this is sort of using mortgage pricing to incentivize energy efficiency and sustainability. So we actually reward and recognize borrowers whose properties are more efficient with effectively a sea change discount on either the standard variable rate or the renovation mortgage rate. And that essentially the level of a discount is based on the home's environmental or energy performance. So for new properties, we have a minimum standard. It's got to be a very high B, absolute minimum. We always prefer to do A or something higher, but that's where we tend to do that. And on once the property's been completed, the borrower is then eligible for one of those sea change discounts. And then for renovations and conversions, essentially it's a 0.25% discount for every improvement in the EPC standards. So if you improved 3 EPC grades from sort of D to A or something, you get 0.75% discount, and that's the remaining term of the mortgage. So I've just talked a bit about the sort of the way the pricing works. I think it's really important to reflect, and it's great that Jonathan and Marianne have just arrived as well, because they reflected on this as well. So as I said earlier on, we're not just interested in our lending. Our lending is sort of one of the ways in which we enable sustainable communities and sustainable living. But really, we're here to sort of support and contribute to ethical finance, wider sustainable homes and communities, that sort of not tackling climate change, apologies, but tackling climate change and supporting the natural environment. So we work with a wide range of partners, and these are just some of the examples that I thought might be more relevant to today. So we do work with Carbon Co-op and their People Powered Retrofit program. We've worked with RetrofitWorks, who've been campaigning in England and Wales for a national retrofit strategy. And I mentioned earlier on, we support some cooperative initiatives. So we actually put some money with cooperative and community finance to help support their RetrofitWorks program. We're working with the Coalition for the Energy Efficiency of Buildings at the Green Finance Institute, founder members of the Passive House Trust, and members of AECB. In the last couple of years, we've joined things like United Nations Principles for Responsible Banking, the UNEP Net Zero Banking Alliance, which has been talked about quite a bit today because today's Finance Day at COP, and also Bankers for Net Zero. That just gives you a sort of flavour of our role in terms of agitating and advocating for change in the financial system, which we believe is absolutely necessary if we're going to support the net zero objectives. So that's pretty much it. It's not happy today, no, at all. It's good. So that's a picture of the team at Ecology with the SDGs in Silsden on a lovely sunny bright day, as you can see. So yeah, that's it. So I'll be around for the rest of the evening. So if anybody has any questions about Ecology or would like to come and talk to us, maybe sort of work in collaboration with us, I'm here to chat, to talk. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ian. Yeah, so we are ready to get stuck in. I mean, Jonathan and Marianne, have you caught your breath? Okay. Would you guys like to come over, and our community energy group representatives as well, if you guys want to come over? Yeah. Hi. How are you? So the general running order of the rest of the evening will be that we're going to hear from you guys a little bit about Carbon Co-op, Powered Retrofit and that, and we've got your slides all loaded up here, so just shout, like, we're all friends here, it's all a bit informal. And then we've got representatives from different community energy groups who can introduce themselves in a minute. Yeah, so I'll shut up and you guys can get on if you like. I'm just going to give you this because we've got a virtual audience as well. We've got a few people here as well. So if they want to hear you.
Hi there. I'm really sorry that we're a little bit late, but there's a lot of traffic, well, mainly police in town today. Did you do a show of hands who's in the room? I would really like to know if you're an architect or a building construction professional, could you put your hand up? Oh my God. Could you put your hand up if you're not an architect? Or okay, and but also community energy groups. If you, I mean, and there might be a crossover, and that's great. So if you're part of a community energy group, put your hand up. Okay, so I reckon there's maybe like 2/3 building professionals, a quarter or a fifth, maybe, like from the community, which is great. And yes. Sorry, I know I was at an event last night, and it was good to get it zoomed and all that. Yeah, yeah. So, and I'm assuming there's some other people that don't fit into either of those categories, and that's totally fine. So that's really interesting because that's part of our mission, is to bring together those two disciplines. So I am Jonathan. I'm from Carbon Co-op. I come from a community, cooperative, and an activist background, environmental activism, and yeah, that's what I'm bringing.
So, yeah, I'm Marianne. I work at URBED, which is a kind of multidisciplinary design practice, and I'm an architect by training and have spent about the last decade doing retrofit stuff, a lot of it with Carbon Co-op.
Yeah, and a lot of what we'll talk about today is the collaborative efforts of both of us, and an extensive team as well. It's not just the two of us, but part of what I think is brought the success of Carbon Co-op, the success that we have had anyway, is that we're able to bring high quality technical discipline in an area that doesn't often have that. Has a lot of goodwill and energy and volunteerism, and it's fantastic and really really agile, but often and sometimes it lacks that technical expertise and rigor. And when we talk about people-powered retrofit, one of the success things we've been able to do is to bring value that the clients and the householders want and are willing to pay for, and that's been part of what we've done. Okay, so we'll whiz through this bit, the technical bit, and then we'll have other people as well. Are you sure? So if you want to chip in.
Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, so the question here is like, how do we build community-led markets for retrofit? And one of my contentions, or our contentions, is that some of the barriers to creating a retrofit market at all can be overcome by that community-led, community buy-in approach, the cooperative approach. Okay, so a little bit about Carbon Co-op. We've been going for 10 years incorporated, 13, 14 years, a few years as a project before we incorporated. We have 350 members, growing by a third a year. So it's fairly fast growing. Members, householders, are the ultimate owners of our organization. They join to gain access to technical expertise, to knowledge and information, to projects and finance, but also to create a group of like-minded individuals working towards similar aims. And the fundamental driving force, Carbon Co-op, it's in the name, is around climate change, tackling climate change, reducing carbon emissions. So we've got lots of things that we've done. I'm not going to talk about them in detail. Retrofit, we need to get a new diagram. Marianne's told me. It's an old diagram. But our focus is on energy efficiency improvements, domestic scale renewables as part of that package, and smart systems. But our focus is fabric first, you know, tackling the fabric of the building, reducing demand first and foremost.
For that to actually include doing things like fixing the roof if it's broken, not just kind of putting insulation onto something that needs repair.
And we take a whole house approach. That doesn't mean necessarily that the retrofit is done in one big bang and that's it. There might be stages to it, but there's a plan that people are working towards. We also take into account the embodied energy and the other environmental toxicology, toxicity impacts and materials. I know it's a really interesting and evolving area. We do the best we can, and we're also involved in research in this area. And we take an open source approach. So we publish our ICT tools under open source licenses. We're also committed to PAS 2035. We can pick that up later, but yeah, the quality standard in this area.
If anyone wants to know about PAS 2035 and its implementation, I think that's a separate conversation over. Yeah, maybe not.
Okay. People Powered Retrofit is 2 or 3 years ago. Basically, we've done a lot of disengagement with small scale retrofit projects, well, deep retrofit projects, but in 10, 11 households at a time, and then supporting people through training and capacity building. But People Powered Retrofit, we realized that people had got so far that they were stalled. And what we wanted to do is create an end-to-end service that took people the whole way along. And we were successful at getting funding from BEIS to do a retrofit supply chain pilot, one of 6 around the UK. RetrofitWorks involved in a number of other ones. So what the barriers to a retrofit market at the moment? Previous approaches, Green Deal, people may have heard about 2013, 2014. This was a top-down approach where big companies didn't last long, and it saw lots of poor quality work taking place, not just within Green Deal, but within other kind of eco schemes and what have you. So, in devising a different approach, a bottom-up approach, we looked at householder motivation. Why do householders want to do this, and what are their barriers to this? And kind of overturning some of the assumptions that when we talk to householders, reducing carbon emissions, number one on their kind of list, being warmer and more comfortable, and then money comes into it, but it's down the list. And there are other things, other considerations, such as long-term future-proofing around climate change. The reason is that we're working with the early adopters. And again, this was another kind of one of the errors of Green Deal. It saw everyone the same. We can devise a policy implementation that works for everyone in the UK. Actually, as with most new technologies, innovative technologies, you get early adopters and innovators, pioneers.
People who were part of the Super Homes network kind of 5-10 years ago, and were willing to learn everything about how to retrofit a house and then practically do it themselves because it wasn't an existing supply chain. But we're now working with people who are interested, are a step on from that, and probably don't actually want to go into this and become experts.
So we acknowledge the early majority, the late majority, we need to tackle those, but first and foremost, we need to go with the early adopters. And that's the nature and type of that market's going to be different. They're more motivated by things like environmental concerns. And our research and other research backs that up. And so the pioneers, the Carbon Co-op members, the people that join because they want to do something, they want to go the extra mile, these are the pioneers. And that is why, one of the reasons why community energy is a fantastic match with Retrofit, because our members are those pioneers. Those are the people, the early adopters that want to have work done. And we can learn a lot from them.
Yeah, and they become really excellent advocates as well, because if you've got kind of a random person knocking on your door with a leaflet offering to retrofit your house, that's quite different from talking to your neighbour or your uncle about something they've been involved with and done already.
Okay. So a few things that we did to create Powered Retrofit, and I'm going to slip through these because we've got 10 minutes and we'll probably already do that. We did like a mapping stage. We used GIS mapping. You know, people that work in the built environment may be quite familiar with this stuff, looking at open data sets and bespoke research that we did, trying to identify areas, geographical areas where people more likely to procure a retrofit live. And we did a lot of this work. We also looked at personas, breaking down the type and motivation of people. Again, trying to fit offers to people. Yeah. We also embarked on community-based social marketing. This is a little bit technical for marketing bods, but this approach again really lends itself to community energy. It works with trusted intermediaries, community champions. It radiates messaging through those people. The simple thing, as Marianne said, you're more likely to believe, to be persuaded to do something by someone that you know, a trusted peer, a colleague, a co-worker, a relative. And so we, through a number of diverse different interventions, you produce a community-based social marketing campaign. These are really common in health, around creating like healthy options and healthy living things, trying to persuade people. But we've applied it here, and there's a really good case study in the United States where other people have done the same. Supply chain, and I know one of the questions people had is like, how do we engage with supply chain? How do we build a knowledgeable network of appropriate contractors? We have focused in this work, as have other pilots, around the RMI, refurbishment, maintenance, and improvement. People are already in our homes doing loft conversions, new kitchens, bathrooms, that sort of thing, and skilling them up rather than trying to invent a whole new supply chain to do this. Training for those people needs to be practical because they're already really busy. They don't want to be taking time out, spend time in a classroom. So we focus on practical skills on site or in applied contexts. And again, peer learning is really important. This creating a network of contractors who are working in and around the same environment, likely to subcontract to each other, likely to work together, likely to offer skills and advice to each other rather than look elsewhere for that. So we've done, again, a kind of large kind of piece of work building that supply chain in Greater Manchester.
I should say as well, we did do a kind of smaller bit of work really looking at local architects' practices and who get involved, because there's the people who do the work, but also if you're doing retrofit work as part of an extension or something like that, and you've got an architect engaged in that, then that's a good opportunity to kind of spread some of the learning and get this stuff properly integrated. So we do have a bit of a network of local small practices as well, who again are already doing domestic work, and we're just kind of supporting them to do more of this alongside it.
And I think really supply chain does need to be looked at more holistically. People, policymakers or whoever, just think plumbers, when actually there are software engineers, all kinds of engineers, like architects, assessors, coordinators, all types of different people involved in this.
Yeah, so far I've never been able to successfully engage an estate agent.
It's not impossible. And then we also built a service, an end-to-end service, and a lot of work went into service design, which again is its own practice, its own competency. Very quickly, our service involves 5 different stages that we take people through. And in terms of the business, thinking about the business side of it, we're charging at every stage, charging the client at every stage, aside from the advice at the beginning, which is half an hour and free. But every other stage we're charging as people go along. And we're not waiting till the end to kind of, create that value. There's an assessment, so there's advice, we have an advisor, assessment process, where we have our own methodology and tool that we use, design development that often involves architectural support and involvement, perhaps testing and investigation, procurement support. We're not doing the work, we're not contractors, we don't perform that role, but we assist the householder in procuring. Contractually speaking, we sit to the side of the client. Then on-site support by retrofit coordinators, although we're starting to call them retrofit surveyors, kind of building in an assessment and a coordinator competency. Contractor training on site, a QA framework based around PAS 2035, and then handover and evaluation. And there's lots of different people involved with this. A number of these are on our staff team, most of those to the left. We bring in externals to the right, although obviously Marianne's architect. We have service manager, ICT product manager. Again, ICT is really important part of this. Training manager, both for households and for contractors, retrofit advisor, assessor, coordinator, and we have technical director and business director at the top as well. And that's not to speak about the architects, the engineers, and the contractors. So yeah, lots of different skill sets.
It comes a bit in the service kind of flow diagram, but the ICT stuff's really important because it's about information management. One of the really frustrating things about getting retrofit work done at the moment is that you can't see the data that sits behind your EPC that's been done on your house very easily. That information kind of goes static and gets lost. And in contrast, what we're trying to do is kind of gather information once, make sure it's useful, carry it right through the process. So it does reflect a lot of the stuff. It's quite odd. I think a lot of the energy people are talking like this. They don't seem to be very aware of what's happening in construction with BIM and all that golden thread stuff. And somehow all of this has to come together. It's not totally there yet. We're still working on it, but that's the direction things are going in. Because otherwise you're spending a lot of time just redoing surveys and that kind of thing.
Yeah, incredibly wasteful. So the lessons we have at the moment, we have 65, 70 clients in the process, all at different stages. We're generating income at different stages. We also have a lot of work that we're doing around training and also increasingly around replication, both with local authorities and with other community energy groups as well. So there's lots of stuff going on. In terms of the lessons, next slide. I would say one size does not fit all. That top-down approach isn't really fit for purpose. It's important, really important to build trust from the start. I think that's fundamental to the technical community collaboration. Remaining client-focused. Too often in this sector, people have idealized views of how this should work, and they don't meet the client in that. They think, oh, I've worked it out, but we need to be client-focused and work to those needs. Mapping and research and understanding your market. I think that's a simple thing that people can do without having to launch into this whole kind of service design side of things. Testing and piloting, starting small, but starting. Again, sometimes it's easy to do loads of research and not do anything. Being flexible and iterative, being open to that, things changing over time. The data, I think, data in terms of the evaluation from clients is important. Involving technical expertise and capacity in-house rather than external. The more that you outsource as a community energy group, the less value you're capturing and the more you're losing. To build a viable business model, you need that technical capacity on the staff team as much as possible. Trading as soon as possible, or being open and collaborative. Really, the size of the challenge is huge. We don't have viable retrofit markets at scale. We need to look at our own communities, our own areas, and build from there outwards.
Like one organization or one organization can't do all this. It's going to be a group effort.
And I think, our community share issue. So we are massively overwhelmed by demand at the moment. So we're investing in capacity and bringing more people into the staff team. And at the moment, we're doing something that community energy organizations, community benefit societies can do, issuing equity shares in our business. At the moment, we're up to £330,000 and we're looking to get towards £550,000. So yeah, if you're interested and you want to invest, this is an investment, not a crowdfunder, then there's details at the FX platform. Yeah, it's open till the end of the month, and we'd really love people to invest, because investors then become members, become co-owners, and part of that journey. So yeah.
There's also a lot of information there. There's like the whole business plan is up there if people want to have a read. So
yeah, that really is important. I think the business plan is like 90 pages long. So if you're just interested in more information about any of the stuff I've discussed, then go there, because there's lots. And there's some contact details. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. That's really brilliant. A couple of technical things. I think some of you in virtual space are saying that the sound and the light isn't great, so you fixed it. We have an amazing events team. It's okay, great. And then what we're whoa, hello. So that's really great. Now I'm completely thrown. Yes, so what we're going to do is we're going to just take maybe 2 minutes to swap over, because we've got a virtual panelist. You mentioned earlier Russell from RetrofitWorks. So if you want to grab a drink while we do the quick changeover, and just bear with us, our very patient virtual audience. Just 2 minutes and we'll get Russell up on the screen. Okay, Russell, the floor is yours. You can unmute yourself and yeah, please take the floor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. Sorry I can't be there in person, but actually looking at the queues, I think I'm probably glad I wasn't at COP. I'm going to race through. I think it's more valuable for us to be chatting at the end rather than listening to me drone on. But I'm going to go into some of the critical elements that led us to create the RetrofitWorks Cooperative, and how it can help communities to do what they want to do in the way that they wish to do it. Obviously specifically focused on retrofit. What we do, one of the reasons RetrofitWorks came around, I myself, I'm a civil engineer. I spent many years building roads and feeling very guilty. I renovated my own home, found it fairly insane that nobody could give me any advice to bring my energy bills down as low as possible and save as much carbon as possible. And I realised that actually there are a hell of a lot of people that wanted to do it. I had 3,000 people come and visit my little 3-bed semi in South London over the course of 3 years. And I realised that some of them could be customers if I had my own business. What I did for many years was give people advice and project manage renovations. But it wasn't enough, because there are so many facets of the industry that sort of stare at each other over this great big chasm of action that I had to try and find a model to bring them together. So you'll find there are some similarities between the RetrofitWorks model and Carbon Co-op, but we've come at it from a different angle. The first angle, of course, though, is that every home is unique. These are 40 houses that are actually around my own home in South London when I had it 20 years ago, and these are the energy bills of each one of those individual properties. They're all built within 5 years of each other. They're all within the same part of London. If you carried out an EPC on each of these, they would say the automated advice coming out of the EPC would say the same thing. However, if you see the consistency of each of those pies, the size of the pie is relative to the annual bill. They're all completely unique. You'll see one of the larger pies in the middle there, 39% of the annual bill is to do with heat loss through the walls. Another big fat one down on the right-hand side, I don't know whether you can see my cursor at all. This one here, this is heating inefficiency. In other words, a very poorly performing boiler. If you relied on an EPC, those customers would probably get loft insulation or something, and they wouldn't be targeting the thing that would really be a benefit to them. So it starts off with the good advice, but really, the point about this was really, RetrofitWorks was created by a bunch of people that wanted to make the market really happen. And on the one hand, of course, we've got customers that want to get this done. The offers in the marketplace for renovation in general, very narrow, frankly unattractive to people that don't like talking to a builder. They're not necessarily aware of the measures and the benefits of doing retrofit, and they don't necessarily have the confidence in the supply chain to do the work. The practitioners, on the other hand, well, only until recently had I never met somebody that deliberately wanted to do a bad job, but maybe that story is one for a glass of wine maybe later. But they don't have the capabilities necessary to invest in a market that people aren't asking for. And if they did, they would need some help to understand the technicalities and how to deliver. The other bunch of people that we want to engage with as well are people that we call advocates in our particular model: local authorities, charities, community energy co-ops, people that really want to make this stuff happen, but they struggle to identify customers, they struggle to engage properly commercially with a supply chain to get this done well, to offer warranties and guarantees and make sure the customer is protected. And that's where we wanted a model, and that's where RetrofitWorks came in. It was around the sort of the advent of the Green Deal and the horror show that was bound to be was coming over the hill. I wrote to a whole bunch of trade associations that represented 100,000 SMEs, and we came together to work out what this model would be, including the RIBA for those architects in the room. So they do have a use. So the other bunch that we found very useful are finance providers. They are desperate to lend into the home improvement space. As Ian alluded to earlier on, we in Ecology have known each other for a very long time. You've got to get all of the bits in place to try and introduce more people from the financial sector into this market. So what does our model consist of? Clearly, there are a bunch of people with lots of very different motives that want to do work in their property. And they are represented for the trigger that gets them to take action by a bunch of different people, all of whom are looking after that person, that motive, and trying to get them to do something at the next stage in their journey. These are the advocates. They join RetrofitWorks. They're a member. They own a share. And practitioners that want to do this work, they can't join unless we've vetted them. We know they've got the qualifications, the capabilities, they're trustworthy. So those are two, it's a multi-stakeholder co-op. They both own the co-op. They're equal partners. And in the middle of all that, we have a whole bunch of tools that enable us to grease the wheels, give a professional rigor to the whole process, and make sure everyone was protected on the way through. So online tendering portal is a really critical one. So we could go out to tender to draft proof of letterbox if we wanted to, through the online platform. It really speeds up our processes. Access to grants and finance when they're available. We give regular CPD sessions and discounted training to our members, of all kinds of member. And now RetrofitWorks is a retrofit coordinator accreditation scheme as signed off now by Trustmark. So we oversee the PAS 2035 element of this as well. We accredit our own retrofit coordinators. The model works by charging contractors to do work. So we do it in two ways, actually. We started off by working to set up a contract between a householder and contractor, and then we have an agreement within their membership contract with us that their percentage is paid to us. That is a percentage that's agreed on an open book basis with our advocate members and all the people we work with to set up a scheme, and that could be local authorities or social landlords as well. So it varies depending on how much work RetrofitWorks itself has to do. If, for instance, a community energy co-op actually does the retrofit coordination assessment itself, our percentage might be low. If we have to do absolutely everything and door knock or whatever it might be to generate the leads, then the percentage might be a lot bigger. But that's all decided collaboratively. The challenges of retrofitting a single home, I mean, for those of you who've been involved in retrofit for a while, there's no end of workshops that decide what the barriers to retrofit are, right? But I covered it from a slightly different angle. I think we've been dreadful for many years of making householders an actual offer that convinces them to do this stuff. It's slightly different. If you're a householder with a wodge of money that can afford an architect, well, you go straight to an architect. An architect can take them through the process, give them all the professional rigor. But there are people that have got slightly less money. They want to do something more modest, and it's not in the area of which an architect might want to put their professional time. We're kind of in that gap that architects don't want to occupy. We want to give the technical rigor. We want to give them a really good service. We want them to live in an awesome home. We want to prove that the work that's been done is actually giving them the benefits that we've been promised. But in order to get those people to come forward, the entirety of the offer is all those things listed on the left there. It's the strategy, design, making sure their budget will meet what's been promised. procuring a contractor so that they actually deliver on their promises, translating the designs that are on paper into the brain of the contractor so they know what to buy down at the merchant properly and then put it together properly on site. Coaching them, communicating everybody properly. Most of the failures I've ever experienced on a building site are because people don't talk to each other properly. Cost control, QA, making sure warranties and guarantees are in place so that the householder is protected, not just during the job or whether 1 year hence, but for the 15 or 20 years afterwards as well. And then making sure that we know that the building is actually performed as been promised. The roles within all this they can be very, very flexible. Advocates tend to, on the whole, want to be able to just generate leads and feed them into a scheme that's been designed, host it. So our work in Oxfordshire, we've got a whole bunch of community groups, about 25 of them, and they regularly stand at farmers markets or fetes promoting our Oxfordshire scheme. They can do that, or they can go a bit further, as some of our community energy co-op partners do. They can be the retrofit coordinator or retrofit assessor, but it can work the other way too. Those people can work within the team of RetrofitWorks itself, not just. We do have some in-house employed retrofit coordinators and surveyors, but on the whole, they are freelance, and we've got 50 retrofit coordinators that work for us across the country. And obviously, retrofit designers are critically important, bringing in architects, maybe even historic building advisors at the right point in the journey to make sure that we're doing the right things. The coordinator is absolutely critical. You might see a few of these characters on the right here. These are people that are in our animation that's on our website that explain what we do. And they're quite a rare beast. They're energy competent. They understand the design of buildings and how buildings themselves really perform, but they're commercially savvy. So when they need to be able to talk to a contractor in the language that the contractor understands, and that generally is what's in the contract, what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to perform, and whether they're offering good value for money. Past 2035, I think I'm going to take the Marianne approach to this. Let's talk about it afterwards if you really want to. It's a document that you can read and understand, but this is the standard. That it's not just about what to do, but it's about how to do it. It's a really valuable document. And the customer journey, again, this is a template that can be used by others, but effectively what this slide is demonstrating here, how we take on a lot of the load so that the advocate groups don't have to and contractors don't have to. So in the world of eco-funding, etc., generally a local authority will get hopefully a friendly contractor to do pretty much everything. If they do everything, generally you'll end up with a contractor that's doing what's best for the contractor, not necessarily what's best for the homeowner. So we absorb a lot of those decisions so that they're taken impartially to make sure the contractor is brought in at the right stage and designers are brought in at the right stage as well. We first cut our teeth on a big project for the Greater London Authority, in a project that finished towards the start of 2020. £4.5 million field poverty programme. It really brought together all of our members. There are some critical things I wanted to outline here. 70% of the people that came to us here were vulnerable. In this situation, at that typical kind of contract, you would expect a 30 to 50% dropout rate. We had a less than 5% dropout rate for people that were extremely vulnerable, needed a huge amount of help to get the work done in their properties. That is because of the retrofit coordinator, and because we're a not-for-profit, and because we gave a damn about the outcome. And they knew that, and they trusted us, and that was a really valuable lesson for us. And these are things that we're transferring to the able-to-pay market now. And as Jonathan outlined, there were some schemes that were funded by BEIS. It seems like such a long time ago now. We were successful in 3 areas. So Warmer Sussex with partners Besco and Citizens Advice, both of whom joined as members. The EcoFurb scheme led by Parity Projects, which covers London, and Cozy Homes Oxfordshire, led by Low Carbon Hub, and all the 27 community groups that feed into them, and National Energy Foundation. All of those areas have some similarities, and I'll go into those. So we create an energy model for every individual dwelling across the entire area. So London has an energy model for every building within our database already. So it enables us to do 2 things. One, targeted marketing. We know what work needs to happen in every house based on what work has happened so far. Now, some of you will appreciate that we don't have data on quite a lot of houses. So we've recreated data from a number of different open source data sets, and we allow householders to log on, look at their house before we've gone there and correct the data. So we have what's called, in the first instance, our Plan Builder tool. This is a white labeled tool. enables householders to go on and see what we've already assumed about their building, to correct it if we're wrong. The tool recalculates, reforms the base, and it allows householders, just in the same way that you might go onto the Tesco app, to plop measures into the building, be they SLC heat pumps, insulation, underfloor insulation, draft proofing, solar panels, whatever. On the right, you can see your bills go down, your carbon go down, and your budget go up. And on that basis, if people play around with this tool in the first instance, and then they get in touch, we know they're not time wasters. And we've saved ourselves 1 to 2 hours worth of cost of sitting on the phone, trying to understand visually in our minds what their house is like before they get engaged. So in effect, we have energy plans now in the UK for about 15 million houses based on all of the modelling we've done across the UK. So that's a white label template that other people can tap into if they wish. The whole house plan, this is the next stage. So we've put a human in a house to verify some of the dimensions, to make sure everything's done very much more accurately. The report explains where people are in the journey. And we produce a report to show where they are, what in terms of their own individual performance right now. And we phase the plans towards net zero, including if we know they aren't going to get completely there with spending money and doing work, how they could offset by planting some trees, which we try to avoid. And hopefully with Boris Johnson's promise for 2035 zero carbon electricity network, we won't need to even offset. So again, this is a white label template that's squirted out the back of our software, so it can have any community group logo on it, local authority, social landlord logo on it, and this is PAS 2035 compliant report. So the customer journey is broken down the same way that Carbon Co-op charge on a phased basis. We do that too. What we've experimented with when we had the BEIS funding was keeping the front end very low price, so we could try and shove people in the funnel at the front end and earn the money from the percentages from the contractors at the tail end. It was going really well until the Green Home Grant Voucher Scheme came along and screwed everything up. But perhaps we'll talk about that and other failed government attempts in our chat later. One slide from the work I did to model the requirement for a national retrofit strategy, just to show you, it's all very well having the software and the good conversations and the retrofit coordinators, but this is the number of people we need to bring into our supply chain to deal with the amount of work that's required in the UK. So here is now. Big assumption there that we were going to have a heat and building strategy that press go on retrofit. We haven't. This is the number of people. So 2008, we had a big drop in the number of people working in retrofit in the RMI sector. Never recovered from that, by the way. But this is the amount of people we need to introduce and all the trades we need to introduce to the UK to get retrofit done to hit our 2050 target. By the way, I set it as 2040 in the modelling because I feel, along with the IPCC, that 2050 is too late. This is an enormous task. We aren't going to get people excited to hit the industry if we aren't getting householders excited enough to want to buy retrofit. So, final slide. How do we replicate RetrofitWorks in each area? Well, effectively, our cooperative can bring customer engagement experience and the tools to do that. You've seen some of those. Contractor engagement. So we are contractor owned. They have a stake. One of the really useful things we found, not just in the GLA scheme, but in our able to pay schemes, is that contractors have a customer, and if the customer says, I would really like to be green, and the contractor has no idea what that is, the contractors actually bring the customer to our scheme. That is a really great way of driving through high quality. So the contractor knows they'll get great support from a coordinator, maybe access to finance. So that works very well. Customer journey templates, proven financial model templates. So our Cozy Homes Oxfordshire programme now is in profit. With no government incentives, no subsidy as a scheme right now. The work that we do is providing enough surplus to finance itself, which is really great news for us. Customer finance is in development, but we do have regular access to government grants because we deal on eco and LAD funded scheme work as well for people that are on lower income. But what we would have to do, working with any new community group or local authority or council or social landlord that we're working with, we would have to work together on whatever the scheme brand might be. It would suit to suit and attract the customers that you're looking to try and bring on. A customer journey that suits the way that you think things ought to be delivered. The community group role and what that they'd like to take in that customer journey. Do you want hands off? Is it just leaflet dropping, or is it going on and really training in internal people to be retrofit coordinators, etc.? But critically, there needs to be working capital to pay for all of this stuff. A lot of work has to happen before you even make your first offer to your first customer. That costs a lot. We've learned a hell of a lot now, so our model shows that we need a lot less money than we would have done 5 years ago, but nonetheless, it's important. So this is the beauty of Carbon Co-op's model in being a community benefit society and be able to generate that money. But I guess there are other ways to do that as well, and even local authorities are now creating green bonds to be able to potentially pay for that. And our model shows now, particularly with our success in Oxfordshire, that we can generate a return on that investment as well. There's more. There's a great little video if you want to have a look on our website that shows how this all works in 4 minutes flat. And here's how to get in touch if you have any questions and we don't have time to go through it all right now. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Russell. That was great. I'm just to keep you all on your toes. I think we've run over a little bit because I think it was maybe a little ambitious to think we could get through everything those guys have done in the last 15 years and everything Russell has done in the last 15, 20 years. So what we might do as well is, might we want to turn the lights on so the virtual room can see the panelists? So it's lovely and romantic with this lighting, but we might have to just like turn on these ones. Oh, we'll go romantic again in about half an hour, okay? So like, let's just, but I think what we'll do is, if you guys just really quickly introduce yourselves, because I think we're probably running low on time for that. So if you can all just quickly introduce yourselves, and then these guys have prepared some questions that they're going to ask to Jonathan, Marianne, and Russell to sort of get the conversation going. So I'm going to hand over to you, Sal.
Hi, so I'm Sal from Stoke Energy. We're a relatively new community energy group based down in Hackney in London, with Sarah and Dave, and Dan has just arrived as well. So there's lots of Stoke Energyites in the room. Just to sort of quickly say how we got going, we're very much on board with retrofit, and we, absolutely know that fabric first is the way forward, but as a sort of way to get our group going, we started with solar. It's very visible and investable, and it's a quick way to kind of get people on board. And to cut a long story short, we've managed to apply for some London community energy funding and get some installations on our local secondary school, which has been great and a game changer for us in terms of cementing a relationship with the council. So in terms of just getting that sort of trust going, we're starting to embed within the local community. But what we really want to do is learn from you guys how to get the retrofit bit going. And Dave is also
two for the price of one. Yeah. So also Stoke Energy. We held a community engagement event recently in a 100-year-old working men's club building, which we're also trying to put solar on, and gauged the feedback from the audience that retrofit really was the thing they were interested in, whether it's low-level energy efficiency or full whole house. What I've been doing as part of the volunteering work is try and figure out what our business model is, what is the business plan in order to do a community share offer, or even offer membership to our communities and tell them what we can bring them. And in the absence of any kind of subsidies or grants, it's not the old school model of let's build a solar farm and here's a return with your feed-in tariff subsidized money, or here's some grants that you can apply for your loft insulation in retrofit, because it's not there anymore. So adopting a model like we've just seen now without having to do it all from scratch is really what we're looking at.
Hi everyone, I'm Matt. I'm here representing a community group called Zero Carbon Daviot. Daviot's a village 3 hours north of here, where the average EPC is a D and it's very cold. So we're a community of around 450 homes, about 1,000 people, and I know there is some interest. I guess I question the sort of size we need to be to start getting this going, but I know there's a lot of other community groups in the northeast of Scotland who are keen to get involved, and some are hopefully on the chat as well. Yeah, we as a starting exercise, I mean, we're only a year old, but as a starting exercise, I got a small grant from the Vattenfall Fund to bring John Gilbert Architects up to Daviot and to do a sort of paper desk study of 3 homes, taking a whole house retrofit approach, in the hope that their kind of report is the start of a public engagement exercise, to kind of let people see what whole house retrofit looks like. Yeah, looking forward to talking more. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Chris Kerris. I'm in Glasgow. I'm co-founder of Local Home Retrofit Community Interest Company. And keeping things short, we've taken a different approach in that we're not a group of people that's intended to, from a community energy group, then set up a retrofit organization. We started out as just 2 people with the intention of setting up a social enterprise that will create employment, and then from the outset having the intention to turn it into a co-op. So we're constituted since June of this year as a co-op, as a community interest company, and as a company limited by guarantee. So, and then today, in fact, we put our membership form on the website, inviting households, local tradespeople, and buildings professionals to get involved, to have an equal say in the development of the co-op, and help us develop a business model. So just on that business model, over the last year, we've been in a sort of test and learn mode with retrofit assessment and advice. So finding out what kind of people are willing to pay, what they're willing to pay, and what for. And we've learned a lot from that. So it's more of sort of learning by doing. And we've advanced our understanding of business models through applying for funds. So we were successful in getting money from Glasgow City Council and from the Social Enterprise Fund from the Scottish Government to run a programme of events. So talks, demonstrations, workshops, open house events over the next few months. And that's going to be starting quite soon. So that was a very quick run through of a lot more that I might have time to say. But yeah, look, if you're in Glasgow and you're interested in that kind of thing, please do drop us a line and get involved.
I guess one we could start with, I'm sort of interested in how the drivers, we've talked about all the complexity of retrofit and trying to persuade people to get that going. It's expensive. You need to have the full house plan and do things in the right order so that you can start slowly with your budget. But you sort of set the drivers up with your kind of innovators who've set, sustainability as their first driver. So that's for an individual homeowner who is already on board. As this kind of starts to take off and we need to build and scale and get past the innovators, how do those drivers change, or how do you envision or see that they might be changing? And are the drivers very different if it's a council who you're trying to get to, work on a bigger scale project versus an individual homeowner? Sorry if that's a long question.
Yeah, sure. Well, I tell you what, if you take this, Marianne, then we're going to.
Okay. It's all live action here. What we'll do is we'll just let them pass to you. And then if Russell, if you would like to add anything to what Marianne or Jonathan say, then do that. And then the next question will start with Russell and then you guys can add to it. How's that? Good?
Yeah, that should work. So I think, drivers for people are obviously going to change. And one of the reasons that we're working with those innovators at the moment, those early adopters, is that they have a little bit more patience for stuff. They're willing to put up with some of the snags and they're willing to kind of work through them to a degree. It's getting smoother all the time, but the first time you do this kind of thing, it is complicated. I suppose the other thing I'd say is with those people, they're probably about 10% of the population. And the principle I was working on, and actually that we've worked on since we did some work for SHAP about a decade ago on what we called at the time the Community Green Deal, which was before the Green Deal made it a dirty word. But once you've got about 10% of the population that have been involved in this, had this done, it starts to normalize getting it done anyway. And to be honest, there's quite enough to do to get to that point that I'm not so worried about what happens afterwards right now. I think councils are very different because they have I'm doing some work on the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund demonstrator at the moment. And they're much more driven generally by fuel poverty and by investment in the stock. So it has to stack up in a different way. A householder is paying sometimes for things that are intangible, like comfort. A council wants their tenants to be healthy, but they're not, they're not getting the direct benefit of that. So it is different.
Yeah, and just on the public versus, almost you can divide like procurement of retrofit from public procurement and private owner-occupier procurement. And I think they're almost two different like customer journeys and use cases. There is commonality, obviously, in the measures, and in some senses in the supply chain, but there is a big divergence in what constitutes like a positive outcome, what success looks like. And publicly procured works is quite different to owner-occupier, and the drivers is different. It may be that a single business can do both, it's totally viable, but it may be that a business, a social enterprise, or whoever focuses on one or the other rather than trying to do everything.
Yeah, I'd add to that, if that's okay. So just following on from Jonathan's point, I guess there, we're actually we actually agreed this morning as a management team, we're going to walk away from a £35 million public funded contract because we want to do work for individual householders. And that big contract sounds cool, but it's a massive distraction from and the reason we made that decision is because the government screwed the heat and building strategy up so badly, it was so spineless that somebody needs to fill the gap. So we just want to crack on with it, work with householders. And your question was about how you reach the people that are not the innovators. Well, basically you kind of have to go with the grain. And that is working with the way industry kind of works right now, even though you don't like it very much, but just do it better than everybody else. And we even had a little chat the other day about whether we should just make it ourselves look like a normal building firm that doesn't do eco, win a lot of work because we have a good price and sneak the insulation in without people knowing. That might actually get more done.
I've got a question for Glasgow, since we're in Glasgow. So the typical Glasgow tenement might have 8 or 9 properties. There'll be private rent, social rent, owner-occupier, and even a commercial property, a shop in the ground floor. So my question is, what role do you think community intermediaries or community groups might play in solving that particular problem? Maybe Russell first, please. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. So, well, the first thing is you've got to get everyone to agree on what needs to happen and when it's going to happen. Any work that I've ever done on any kind of a block that involves shared access, shared assets, that kind of stuff, you get one person that doesn't want it to happen and nothing happens. So it's about the word that Jonathan and Marianne and I have all used, and that's trust. The community groups that are local can engage properly. You've all got a stake in the success of that project. You might not live in it, you might not own the building, but you care enough about it to help those people to get their stuff done. So, and all those people you've described there, they've all got different motives, but they'd all love their building when it's done. So, that's the key thing from my perspective. Any particular problems we may have had in any of our jobs over the last 10 years, whether it's a vulnerable customer, whether it's a tenant in a social block, private rented property, we always know who our local trusted intermediary is to try and make that work happen. And that's definitely the key aspect from my perspective.
Thank you. Yeah.
Did you guys want to add?
Well, is there anyone here from John Gilbert's Architects? We've got a good relationship with John Gilbert's, came up and did a knowledge transfer with them. So they have produced a tenements handbook for retrofit, and so anything we're saying, I think, is sort of from them, and they're real experts on that. So tenements, the issues there are like threefold. Technical, there's issues with like multi units. They're social because without the consent of everyone, or there are some mechanisms to drive people. That's really tough. And then financial as well. So there's real issues there. That tenement handbook is fantastic, and I think there definitely is a role there. But I think the Scottish Government in the past has shown interest in trying to to assist that process. But I think it does need intermediaries, as Russell said, drive that. So do you have your hand up? So the point there, what's your name? Becca just said that John Gilbert's done an update to that, which yeah, with more information on retrofit and NFIT and that sort of thing. I don't know, Marianne?
I suppose that there's something to be said about different people and different organizations, but often it comes down to people and their skills as well, having different roles in the process. And what we've learned is that it can not work terribly well to try and get a services engineer to do a handover for a tenant who doesn't know the first thing about heat curves, and why would they? So having someone who has enough technical understanding to then be able to explain things in a way that is understandable and engaging to someone who isn't an expert, that's really valuable. And I think that's something that community energy groups are often really good at.
Brilliant, thank you. Matt?
Yeah, my question was on the skills base. Which it's great listening to what you're saying about how you've gotten engaged with all the trades and trade associations. That sounds like a great approach, I guess. In where we are, it's a rural community, it's a rural area. My sort of general understanding of trades where we are is there's a lot of independent traders, not so many kind of medium-sized trainers who have the sparkies and the plumbers and the joiners under one roof, which is kind of useful. There's only one retrofit coordinator in the whole of the northeast of Scotland, and you're looking at him, and there's no past 20-30 tradesmen either. So I've had interest from one of our local councillors about trying to start looking at this, but I guess my question is, you guys have been doing this for 10 years and you are where you are at. How can we accelerate this? Yeah, thanks.
I'm going to give this to, okay, Russell, would you like to take this one first? I think this is probably a big question that has been on all of our minds. So, no pressure on this one.
No, I don't. So, yeah, I mean, it's I'll be honest with you, this is the defining problem of retrofit, and it will be the defining problem of whether we solve climate change. It's the biggest problem. It's our critical path to getting 27.5 million buildings retrofitted. There's no incentive at the moment for anybody to want to work in an industry that's seen as dirty at the end of the line, and the only thing you get into because you've run out of stuff that you could possibly do with your life. We've got a massive thing that we need to do to change people's perception of working in the home improvement sector. I mean, I'm a chartered civil engineer. Why the hell am I doing this? I'm doing it because I see that there is a big opportunity to change so many people's lives and to have a big impact on the planet. Now, if we got many more people to see it from that way, I think we'd have a hell of a lot of people moving into this. It has to start at school. And the other place that it has to start is it has to start with people that are fairly disenfranchised in the industries they're working in right now, but have got skills that can transfer very easily. We see there's a lot of chatter at the moment, of course, about heat pumps. I know that as we grow the amount of EVs in the sector, there's probably a huge amount of people currently fixing internal combustion engines that could probably fix a heat pump in a jiffy. I don't see anybody with half a brain in government thinking about these kinds of connections. Colleges, unfortunately, aren't offering the right training either. So if there was suddenly a tap turned on with some funding that was available and an incentive for customers that would suddenly start wanting to do this work, a builder couldn't, and any other tradesperson couldn't turn around to the closest college and say, oh, right, I want to go on this training course because this person's asked me to install this thing in their house. I don't know what it is, but I know you run the training, because nobody's running the training. There's a critical role here for local authorities to understand the housing stock in their area, to know what trades they need to be incentivizing and creating to get this work done. That has to start right there. At the other end of the spectrum, though, of course, there are people that want this work done now. Our model is slightly different from the way that Carbon Co-op and Futureproof have been pushing out their particular training. Our model is to find somebody, help them do the pricing for their job, even if they don't quite know what it is. And we basically get a retrofit coordinator to sit on them to make sure they're doing the job properly and they learn as they're going. It's more expensive, but the customer's kind of paying. And we have to rely, though, on the early adopters. As Marianne said, they're kind of more patient people. And some of our customers love the fact we've got some builders in their house that are learning as they go. We have quite a novel methodology in the UK now for apprenticeships as well. We've moved away from very specific time-based approaches to serving an apprenticeship. They're now apprenticeship standards, and industry can come together to dictate what they believe an apprenticeship should look like. Now, if we have enough companies in your part of Scotland there, Matt, to get together and say, well, our buildings are very unique to our part of the world, but actually, if we look at the entirety of Scotland, we might have a scheme going here. It's about ground up, I'm afraid now. It's slightly different in Scotland because you've got the government that actually knows what they're doing. But we've got the ability and the wherewithal to do this from a ground up perspective. Community groups know what they're doing. As long as we understand the building stock, I think that's the place to start, and that's why we've worked so hard in getting 15 million buildings into our database, because we can go to local authorities now and say, this is the work that he's doing. These are the trades that need to do this work. This is how many you need. This is the course. These are the courses the colleges need to be running, and start from that basis. You know, there's no reason why we couldn't get contractors right now to be taking on some new trainees. But I think the next problem after that is we haven't got enough companies. Small companies don't want to take on too many new trainees, so we're going to have to create companies as well from scratch. So there's an incubation thing that needs to happen here as well. So it's a multi-dimensional problem. And the reason contractors don't get into it immediately is because nobody's asking for it. There's no incentive. We need a national retrofit strategy that pulls this all together. And I think that's the biggest gap of all.
Do you have anything you wanted to add? Yeah.
I'd say one of the ways we approached it was doing engagement with the local supply chain, and not necessarily looking at it from a kind of, we're looking for retrofit contractors. And in fact, that's one of the things that has worked less well on engaging. It's like, retrofit contractor training, come along to this. You know, we actually, and a lot of it's been network building, working a bit like the community-based social marketing. You work with the householders that are particularly interested. You work through their networks, referral networks. Similar on the other side with contractors. Contractors are interested, have people that they work with, they're interested. Working with an organisation in North Yorkshire, doing very similar approach. And that is more rural than Manchester. They're going out there, talking to local contractors, making face-to-face relationships and building it that way. And that's notwithstanding a lot of the stuff that Russell talks about, like training offers and that sort of thing, but it's like building it that way. The other thing I would say is there's an assumption sometimes that contractors will just jump on work. Maybe it's more from policymakers than maybe the rest of us, but you just put a load of work in front of them and they jump on it. Actually, what we found, talking to that network of contractors we built up, is sometimes the work is, as Russell suggested, messy, complicated, difficult. Some of the householders, some of the clients might be difficult as well. So again, you're bringing something to that. You're bringing good, better quality clients who have a better understanding of what they want, and you can pick up some of that messiness.
I think, yeah, there's all of that, plus the idea of improving quality that Russell mentioned, and not just seeing this as like the dead end industry that you go into at 16 if you messed up at lots of other things, and just generally professionalizing. But which also means that there have to be clients who are willing to pay to do that properly. No more kind of paying people 50 quid a time to insulate a loft, because that's just totally unreasonable. And alongside that as well, I think in the 20 years I've been working in architecture, the gender balance and the diversity of the profession has improved a bit, not as much as it needs to. Going onto a building site, I'm often the only woman there and the only woman for maybe miles around. there's a massive untapped resource there, because a lot of this stuff, you don't need to be a fella to do it. You know, there's 50% of the population who could get involved in this as well. And likewise for kind of ethnic diversity and stuff as well. So I think that might not apply as greatly in Northeast Scotland. I'm from Cumbria, and I think they have some of the same issues, and maybe having a word with CAFs would be interesting for you as well. So Cumbria Action for Sustainability, they have that same geographic thing with, they've had a lot of experience of large scale sudden refurbishment projects following flooding. So they've got kind of interesting insights into how the supply chain works after that as well. So yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you. I think what we'll do is we'll take one more question, and then I think probably we all want to turn these ones off and get another drink and have a chat, because I think there's a lot of really interesting people in the room to like continue the conversation. Everybody's good with that. So I'll just, Dave.
Thank you. Yeah, I think to Jonathan and Marianne, is there any scope for economies of scale and increased demand to bring down the average cost of a retrofit? I know they're all bespoke. And what I'm thinking here is that the government are placing quite a lot of confidence in a rather small incentive for heat pumps to be swapped out to create an incentive to lower the price of a heat pump, so that everyone else goes, oh, do you know what, I'll just get a heat pump instead of swapping out my gas boiler. In retrofit terms, could, once the demand that you've got at the moment presumably is from the very able to pay market, which is low hanging fruit. At some point you need the cost of these retrofit works to come down, in the absence of any kind of support from the government, to a level that people are happy to pay that aren't as well able to pay. Is there any scope to bring down the cost of a retrofit?
So I suppose the first thing I'd say is that when we did our research about who the customers were, one of the interesting things about it was it wasn't the wealthiest 10% of the population. The people who are most interested in this are kind of definitely in the top 50%, but not the people who can afford to run a Range Rover and have a massive house in Cheshire aren't bothered about this stuff, to be honest. It's the teachers living in Levenshulme. It's that. So I think we're already at a level where a decent retrofit probably costs about the same as putting in a new kitchen. You know, that kind of thing to make a good dent on your emissions. So I don't think that's necessary. Finance is not the biggest barrier for even those people who aren't the wealthiest. I think there are potentials for economies of scale, and I think that that's going to be more in the materials, because I think basically the labour there isn't so much, and especially with the housing stock that we've got. I think if you've got I'm doing a project at the moment on a Wimpy No Fines estate in Leeds, so that's very regimented, and you can see how there's like massive economies of scale there, because we're doing 200 flats in one go, and that makes sense. If you're dealing with kind of terraces or semis in South Manchester that have been knocked about over nearly 100 years, and every single one is slightly different, and they're all commissioning it at a different time, that's a lot harder. I think where the economies come is probably in the process, and we talked a lot about, you know, the assessment and the design work and all of that. If we're able to capture that and make that run much more smoothly, that's where we should, well, that's where I'm trying to focus my efforts anyway, because I think at the moment, if anything, builders are sometimes underpaid, and materials there will be, as demand goes up, prices will come down a bit. But actually what's happened at the moment, the last 12 months, when the government, after doing nothing for best part of 10 years and then suddenly pumping a load of money into stuff, prices for heat pumps have gone mad. Prices for external wall insulation has gone mad, because they've basically put a lot of demand into a market that's underdeveloped. So you kind of, there needs to be a hand in hand demand being built and the supply being built at the same time, because if they get out of kilter, it causes problems.
And just to put into some context, so in Greater Manchester, a rough calculation suggests £36 billion to retrofit the housing stock there. In Greater Manchester, that the amount spent every year on energy, £1.5 billion. Yeah, obviously spending £36 billion is going to get rid of that 1.5 billion, but there is scope. And when you look at it, investment to release that kind of that ongoing spend every year with prices, a background of them increasing. So there is the ability to unleash that through finance. But I think I agree totally with Marianne, is that that's like later down the line. The other thing to say is, and I don't have that calculation, is the value of British housing. You know, as a society, we're sitting on a lot of assets as homeowners, and you know, as a wider society as well. They're huge. So there's lots of ways to unleash that. The final thing to say is the systems cost. We talk when we look at retrofit a whole system of a house. If you look at the whole energy system, what we have, if you just take away all the ownership stuff, you have generators and you have consumers. And we have consumers, we have like an engine that's running really inefficiently because it's losing loads of heat through the end bits. Taking a whole systems approach will never green and make that, you know, renewable, that generation, unless we cap the amount of heat we're lost at the end of that. And there are mechanisms within the energy system which at the moment don't reflect that, but increasingly will. So there are lots of opportunities there to kind of link up that resource element of it. But I do agree with Marianne. At the moment, there's a lot of people who don't have finance as an issue, who are willing to invest, and we can use the value there to build our systems and our processes. And a bit like the innovation curve, people will remember like mobile phones when they came out, they were like bricks, they're really expensive, only a few people bought them. Over time, the services and the finance packages and the service design, like it became more effective and then more mass market. And a similar thing will happen with retrofit.
Thanks. Russell, did you have anything to add?
Not much, no. I agree that the process is where the savings are. At the moment, the power is all with the contractor. It's a seller's market. There's not enough of them. They know their value. They're booked up for a year and a half. Good luck with trying to reduce the prices for a long while yet. And at the same time, you've got volatility in pricing. The Federation of Master Builders have just changed their standard template so that they don't have to, none of the contractors have to offer a fixed price anymore. As soon as any material prices go up, the contract allows for them to raise their price. So, I mean, that might affect demand a bit, mightn't it? But, you know, we're in a difficult place. Without solving Matt's problem of creating more contractors, we ain't going to solve the problem of bringing prices down either. But, you know, there's a few robots that spray things on the floors now. I think that we'll be able to scan buildings and potentially produce drawings very quickly for individual buildings, BIM models that can help make decisions. Retrofit coordinators spread across 150 buildings at once, not 3. You know, having the brain used much more effectively with digital tools, I think there's a huge scope to work with there. But you're right though. You know, 30,000 heat pumps a year in a market of 1.6 million boiler replacements every year is not even touching this. My view is that the heat pump prices are going to go up even further because the prices will be hidden by a grant. So it have the opposite effect. And if you want to hear my particularly cynical view, I think this is a charter for hydrogen because it's going to delay the onset of heat pumps. It's going to push the prices of heat pumps up. And when there is a consultation in 5 years' time on the use of hydrogen, all the hydrogen exponents will say, oh, well, heat pump prices have gone up. Let's do hydrogen. So hydrogen's winning right now, which is the last thing we want.
Thanks, Russell. So I think given the time, and we, I think, need to be out of here by 9. I think what we'll do is just move to having some drinks and chatting. I hope you guys can stick around for a little bit and don't mind taking some more questions from that. I think an observation and a lot of discussions that have gone on in the last couple of weeks, months with retrofit is also the idea of cultural transformation, of how we have to stop asking for it to pay us back. We don't necessarily, we're not going to get that. We're not in that. if you take away the climate question from doing retrofit, it's still a winning thing that you want to do. You're going to have a warmer home, a cozier home. You're going to be investing in that, making your home climate resilient, because it needs to be. Things are very much changing. Put the climate question back in. And again, if you're reducing your carbon emissions, it's great. So we will be looking at other ways of pushing our cultural transformation campaigns. If you haven't already, please go to our Households Declare website and declare. We are continuing to build that campaign through ACAN, which is about a kind of public-facing approach to things and getting this sort of cultural transformation underway as well. Because I think any sensible person who was sitting in this room tonight from across the country would just be lining up at your doors to get this thing done. So thank you to everybody who was part of tonight. Thank you very much, Russell. It's a real shame that we don't have you here in the room with us tonight. I can carry the laptop around if you like.
Yeah, so I just point out that I'll make sure that
Yeah.
Ian sent me a bottle of wine. No, he didn't really. I just put it on there to make him feel better. So I'll be partaking, but I'm going to have to turn the screen off. I've got to put the kids to bed.
Thanks very much, Russell. It's a pleasure. Thanks to all our virtual attendees. And we didn't get to ask any of your questions. If you have some, same thing, we'll try and like catch a hold of some of those and see if our guys want to answer. But ultimately, I think you've produced so much information. We'll share the slides afterwards. We'll share all of those sort of documents that they've already been like created. So just read all that stuff and then wait to hear more from ACAN about where we're taking this as well. And thanks to our community energy groups, Sal, Dave, Matt, Chris, thank you very much. Thank you all. And yeah, bar is still open.